Did you really think someone like you could touch my daughter's things? Richard Blackstone's voice was sharp as a knife, slicing through the silence of his mansion. His cold blue eyes blazed with fury as he glared at the black cleaning lady standing at the door of his 6-year-old daughter's bedroom. Kesha Washington, 32, stood tall, even though her heart was pounding. In her hands, she carefully held a doll that had fallen to the floor. But to Richard, it wasn't just a doll. It was a line she wasn't allowed to cross. "Sir, I was only—" Kesha tried to explain. "Shut up." Richard cut her off harshly. "People like you always have excuses." He stepped closer, towering over her like a dark shadow. "You're the 11th maid in 6 months. None of you seem to follow simple rules." What Richard didn't realize was that Kesha had already noticed a pattern weeks earlier. Every maid he had fired had been black or Latina. None of the so-called mistakes ever happened with white workers. And all of those women left humiliated, jobless, and without references. But Kesha Washington wasn't like the rest. She had been raised by a grandmother who worked as a domestic servant in the 1960s, a woman who taught her to recognize racism even when it wore the mask of high standards. For 2 weeks, Kesha had quietly collected proof, recording conversations, saving documents, and writing down every unfair rule that only seemed to apply to non-white staff. "Pack your things and leave my house immediately," Richard ordered, his voice dripping with contempt. "And don't expect any references. People who don't respect boundaries don't deserve second chances." Kesha stayed calm. She placed the doll back on the shelf with extra care and turned to face him. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Blackstone." Her tone was steady. Too steady for someone who had just lost her job. On her way out, she passed by another room. Inside, Richard's daughter Emma sat quietly, playing with ball dolls. The 6-year-old girl, fighting leukemia, gently touched the scarf covering her own bald head. Her sad eyes lit up for just a moment when she noticed Kesha, offering a shy smile, like a child desperate for kindness in a cold, empty home. Richard didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying his little victory, convinced he had put yet another maid in her place. What he also didn't see was a small digital recorder hidden in Kesha's blouse, or the photos she had been taking over the past weeks. He didn't see the determined fire in her eyes, either, the look of a woman with a plan. As Kesha stepped out of the mansion for the last time as an employee, a faint smile appeared on her lips. Richard Blackstone thought he had won another battle. He didn't know he had just started a war with the wrong woman. If you're hooked by this story of justice, don't forget to stay with us, because what Kesha does next will prove that underestimating a strong, intelligent woman is the biggest mistake a proud man can make. 3 hours later, after being humiliated in the Blackstone mansion, Kesha sat at her small kitchen table. She carefully transcribed every word from the recording she had captured earlier. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with controlled anger she had learned to turn into focus. "People like you always have excuses," she repeated under her breath, typing Richard's words into her growing document. This was the 11th recording she had gathered. Her phone rang. It was Mariana Santos, a Latina cleaner who had been fired 2 weeks earlier. "Kesha, I heard he fired you too," Mariana said, her voice heavy with sadness. "I'm so sorry. I told you he's awful to people like us." "What do you mean, people like us?" Kesha asked, though she already knew the answer. "You know," Mariana sighed, "not white. Look at Jennifer, the blonde who worked before me. She lasted 8 months. She broke 3 expensive plates, scratched his car, even fell asleep at work. Do you know what her punishment was? A polite lecture and a second chance." Kesha silently took note. She had heard Jennifer's name mentioned before, always as proof of how differently white workers were treated. "And you know what hurts me most?" Mariana continued. "His little girl, Emma. Poor child. So sick, so lonely. Sometimes I'd see her staring out the window, all by herself in that huge house. A 6-year-old shouldn't live like that." Kesha opened a drawer and pulled out an old, faded photo of her grandmother Dorothy, taken in 1962. Dorothy stood in a maid's uniform in front of a wealthy mansion. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a message to her granddaughter. "Never bow your head to anyone who thinks they are better than you. Dignity cannot be bought or sold. Kesha stared at the photo, her voice trembling with determination. Grandma, if you were here, what would you do? And in her heart, she already knew the answer. Smart women don't fight like dogs in the street. Smart women pick up the stones first and then build a castle that tears down the enemy's walls. For the first time since her firing, Kesha smiled. Her grandmother Dorothy would have been proud. Kesha had earned a degree in communications and once worked as a production assistant at a TV station. But when bills piled up, she turned to cleaning jobs to survive. Now, sitting in front of her laptop, she opened the folder she had named Operation Dignity. Inside were her weapons. Audio recordings, photos of suspicious documents, screenshots of Richard's discriminatory messages to his secretary about the right kind of person to hire, and even hidden videos showing how differently he treated white staff compared to black and Latino workers. But her strongest weapon was something Richard had no idea she had found. In her second week at the mansion, while cleaning his office, she discovered a folder left open on his desk. Inside were emails between Richard and other wealthy businessmen. The messages openly discussed using hidden codes in job ads to keep out unwanted applicants. It needs to be someone who fits with our family. Richard had written, "You know what I mean. We don't want anyone who might negatively influence our children." His friend replied, "I understand completely. I also like to protect our cultural heritage. Some people just don't respect our traditional values." Kesha had taken careful photos of every email. That evening, she called her cousin Denise, an investigative reporter at a local TV station. "Denise, I need a favor. And before you ask, yes, this is about justice. And yes, it's going to shake this entire town." "What kind of story?" Denise asked, already curious. "The kind that shows racism from the 1960s never died. It just learned to wear Italian suits and live in mansions worth millions." As Kesha explained, her anger transformed into something more powerful: purpose. Every insult, every unfair firing, every humiliation was now evidence. And there was one part of her plan that even Denise didn't know yet, something involving little Emma, that would turn this from a simple expose into Richard Blackstone's greatest downfall. Richard had unknowingly declared war on a woman who carried the strength of 3 generations of survivors and the patience of someone who understood that the best revenge comes when it's least expected. 1 week later, Kesha sat in the small studio Denise had set up in her basement. The walls were covered in soundproof foam, and professional microphones stood ready. "Cousin, this is pure gold," Denise whispered, going through the files for the 3rd time. "But you know we can't just publish this yet. Millionaire lawyers are dangerous." Kesha smirked and opened another folder on her laptop. "Who said I stopped collecting evidence?" Over the past 7 days, she had become a full-time investigator. Through contact from other former workers, she gained access to private WhatsApp groups where domestic employees in wealthy neighborhoods shared their experiences. What she found left her furious and determined. Richard Blackstone wasn't the only one. There was a whole network of rich employers trading blacklists of so-called problematic workers. In reality, those lists targeted Black and Latino women who dared to complain about abuse or ask for fair treatment. "Look at this," Kesha said, showing Denise a screenshot from a group called Conscious Employers. Richard himself had written, "Be careful with Kesha Washington. Too opinionated. Doesn't respect authority. Brings unnecessary trouble into homes." The reply from someone named Mrs. Peterson was even worse. "Thanks for the warning, Richard. I've already removed her resume. We can't let that kind of influence near our families." Denise shook her head in disbelief. "That's not just discrimination. That's conspiracy to destroy people's careers." "It's still not enough," Kesha said firmly. "We need something that proves his pattern beyond doubt. Something no one can deny." Then she told Denise about Emma. "His daughter has leukemia. She's only 6, bald from chemo, living in that mansion completely alone. And Richard can barely even look at her." "That's heartbreaking," Denise said softly. "But how does that connect to our case?" Kesha leaned forward. "Richard fires non-white workers, saying they're not appropriate to be near his daughter. But the truth? He can't even face Emma himself. He hides his failures as a father behind racism. Kesha's plan wasn't just to prove Richard was racist. She wanted to expose him as a hypocrite, a man who claimed to protect his daughter from outside influences while emotionally abandoning her when she needed him most. I already have a source inside the house, Kesha added. Carmen Rodriguez, the housekeeper. She's been there 15 years. She's tired of Richard's cruelty, and she's worried about Emma. Just yesterday, Carmen had called Kesha in secret while Richard was at a meeting. She confirmed what Kesha already suspected. Every recently fired maid had been black or Latina, while white workers with worse performance always kept their jobs. Carmen's voice had broken when she told Kesha the hardest part. The saddest thing, she whispered, is how he ignores her completely. That little girl asks every week if a new lady is coming to talk to her. She feels abandoned. Kesha's plan was no longer just about exposing workplace discrimination. It was about revealing Richard for what he really was, a hypocrite, a man who pretended he was protecting his daughter, while denying her the love and comfort she needed most. "Cousin, I have to go back into that house," Kesha said, her eyes burning with determination. Not as a maid this time, but as the woman who will show the world who Richard Blackstone truly is. Denise leaned forward. "What exactly are you planning?" "Something that touches every heart that sees it. Something that shows how racism doesn't just wound workers. It can even poison the bond between a father and his child." Carmen had explained that Emma was always sad when she saw other children with pretty hair. The girl often asked if her curls would ever come back. "Are you sure about this?" Denise asked nervously after Kesha revealed the final step of her plan. It could backfire. "It won't," Kesha said firmly. "Richard spent months humiliating women like me, saying we weren't fit to be near his daughter. Now I'll show him and everyone else what true care looks like." The plan was bold but simple. While Richard spent Saturday at his elite golf club, Kesha would return to the mansion. Carmen would leave the back door unlocked. With hidden cameras Denise provided, Kesha would capture the entire moment on film when she gave Emma a wig. "Just picture it," Kesha explained. A 6-year-old with cancer, neglected by her racist father, finally receiving love from the very kind of woman he calls unfit. But there was more to Kesha's mission, something even Denise didn't know. As she prepared, Kesha pulled out the old photo of her grandmother Dorothy. A memory stirred, one she had never shared. Her mother, as a child, had lost her hair to an experimental drug in the 1960s. The white family her grandmother worked for turned away in disgust. The only person who showed her mother kindness back then was the black maid who secretly brought her comfort. That little girl was Kesha's mother. Now, decades later, Kesha was about to close that circle. This wasn't only about revenge. It was about breaking generations of silence, humiliation, and abandonment. When Richard finally realized the truth about the woman he had dismissed, about what he had thrown away, it would be far too late. The morning of the plan, Kesha tested the recording equipment, her eyes shining with fire that looked almost supernatural. She wasn't just carrying cameras. She was carrying the power to rewrite history. For herself, her mother, and every woman Richard had crushed. Saturday morning, Richard was at his golf club, drinking with other wealthy members of the white elite. At the mansion, Kesha approached with her heart racing, but her mind steady. As promised, Carmen had left the back door unlocked. Tiny hidden cameras were tucked into Kesha's blouse and bag. Every moment would be caught in crystal clear video. "Emma, sweetheart," Carmen called gently as Kesha stepped into the kitchen. "There's someone here to meet you." At the top of the stairs, Emma appeared in unicorn pajamas. Her scarf slipped slightly, showing her bald head. When she saw Kesha, her big eyes lit up. "Hi, Emma," Kesha said warmly, kneeling down to the girl's height. "My name is Kesha. I've heard you're a very special princess." Emma came down shyly, curiosity written on her face. "You're pretty," she said innocently. Then, with childlike honesty, she asked, "But why did Daddy say people like you can't work here?" The question hit Kesha like a stone, but she kept her gentle smile. "Sometimes adults say things that don't make sense, sweetheart. What matters is how we treat each other, with kindness." Then, Slowly, Kesha opened her bag and lifted out the wig. Golden curls sparkled in the morning light. Emma gasped, her eyes filling with tears. It looks just like my hair used to. Would you like to try it on? Kesha asked softly. Emma's little hands trembled as she pulled off her scarf. Carefully, Kesha placed the wig on her head. It fit perfectly. Carmen brought over a mirror. The moment Emma saw herself, she let out a squeal of joy. It's me. It's really me. She spun in circles, her curls bouncing as her face glowed with happiness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The hidden cameras caught everything. The pure joy of a child who had been given back her confidence, and the love of a black woman who, in just 10 minutes, gave Emma more comfort than her father had in months. Can I show Daddy when he gets home? Emma asked, twirling one more time. Of course, Princess, Kesha said softly. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you smiling like this. But neither of them expected what happened next. Richard had cut his golf trip short after problems with a business deal. At 11:45 a.m., the sound of a key turned in the lock. Daddy, Emma cried, running toward the front door, her golden curls flying behind her like sunshine. Look how pretty I am. Richard froze in the hallway. His eyes darted from his smiling daughter to Kesha, who stood calmly in the living room, then back to Emma. His expression shifted in seconds, confusion, recognition, and finally, explosive rage. What is this woman doing in my house? He thundered, his voice shaking the walls. How dare she touch my daughter? Daddy, she gave me my hair back. Emma beamed, unaware of the tension. Now I can be a princess again. Carmen, Richard barked. Call the police, trespassing, kidnapping. Kesha stayed calm, her hand steady as she quietly checked the hidden cameras. Mr. Blackstone, I only came here to bring a little joy to your child. Something you seem unable to do. How dare you? Richard roared, stepping closer. People like you have no right to be near my daughter, no right to enter houses like mine. People like me, Kesha repeated, her voice sharp enough to make him hesitate. You mean black people, don't you? Emma, still wearing the wig, stepped between them. Please don't yell at Kesha, Daddy. She made me happy. Why is that bad? Her innocent words hit him harder than any accusation. Richard's face twitched as he looked at his glowing daughter, then at Kesha, who smiled with quiet defiance. Because she's not like us, Emma. She doesn't share our values, our family traditions. Traditions? Kesha, cut in. Do you mean firing 11 non-white workers in 6 months? Or sharing secret blacklists with other races' employers? Or maybe the tradition of abandoning a 6-year-old child with cancer? Richard paled. What are you talking about? Kesha pulled out her phone and pressed play. Richard's own voice echoed through the room. People like you always have excuses. We don't want bad influences around our children. How did you get this? He stammered, his face drained of color. The same way I got these. She laid out copies of emails he'd sent other employers, then text messages from a so-called conscious employers group. Finally, she showed a video of him treating white workers kindly while humiliating non-white staff. Richard lunged her phone, but Kesha stepped back. Don't worry, Mr. Blackstone. These are just copies. The originals are already safe with people very interested in exposing racial discrimination. This is invasion of privacy. You can't prove anything. Actually, a female voice cut in from the doorway. We can... Denise entered with a camera crew, mics, and live broadcast equipment. Good afternoon, Mr. Blackstone. I'm Denise Washington from Channel 7 News. Care to explain your hiring practices? Richard's face twisted in panic. Get out. I'll sue all of you. On what grounds? Kesha asked calmly. For showing how you treat sick children? For recording your own words? For proving your racism live on air? Emma, still in her wig, stared at her father in confusion. For the first time, she saw him completely unravel, screaming, waving his arms like a child throwing a tantrum. Kesha made me happy, Daddy, she whispered. Why are you angry at someone who made me happy? Denise's cameras caught every word. The moment was streamed live across the city. Richard Blackstone, once a respected businessman, was now being confronted by his own daughter about his prejudice. Within hours, the video went viral. Hashtags like hashtag Emma deserves better and hashtag racism exposed live trended as people shared the clip tens of thousands of times. 3 months later, Richard sat in his empty office, staring at the for sale signs on his mansion's lawn. His company had lost 80% of its contracts overnight. Big clients, embarrassed to be linked to his racist practices, cut ties. The employers' group was dismantled after a civil rights investigation, and lawsuits cost its members millions. The secret blacklist was declared illegal, forcing them to pay heavy compensation. Emma was no longer in his care. A judge had deemed him emotionally unfit, and Carmen Rodriguez now held custody. Away from her father's toxic presence, Emma blossomed. She only wore her wig when she wanted, and her self-esteem grew stronger each day. One afternoon in Kesha's modest new home, Emma came running with a drawing. It showed 3 figures holding hands: a black woman, a Latina woman, and a little girl with golden curls. "We're a real family now," she said, hugging Kesha tightly. The story inspired countless others. Dozens of domestic workers came forward to expose racist employers, forming a support network that Kesha helped lead. Meanwhile, Richard had lost everything, not just his wealth, but the respect of his own child. On one supervised visit, Emma had looked her father straight in the eyes. "Do you not like me because I'm bald, or do you not like Kesha because she's black?" Richard had no answer. 2 years later, Kesha sat proudly in the front row at Emma's kindergarten graduation. The girl, now with her natural hair growing back, received the Courage Award for an essay about why different people can be friends. Far away, Richard sat alone in a small apartment, working as a furniture salesman. His arrogance had cost him everything: his fortune, his reputation, and most painfully, his daughter's love. But Kesha's victory wasn't in destroying him. It was in proving that the very woman Richard once called unfit was the one Emma needed most: to thrive, to grow with dignity, and to learn that real love has no color, class, or prejudice. And if this story of courage and justice touched your heart, remember, sometimes Carmen needs a little help.